The little girl's voice was so soft that almost no one inside the crowded airport cafe noticed it. Almost no one except the exhausted single father whose entire world stopped turning in that single heartbeat. He had been staring into a cup of cold coffee after another impossible week, trying to convince himself that tomorrow would somehow be easier than yesterday. Then he heard four words that made every memory he had buried come crashing back. "Can I sit with you?" Before he could answer, four identical little girls gathered around his table, staring at the faded anchor tattoo on his forearm with wide, innocent eyes. One of them smiled and quietly said that their mother had the exact same tattoo in the exact same place. The color drained from his face. His hands began to shake. The tattoo wasn't something people simply copied. It had been designed for only two people over 15 years ago. At that moment, every painful chapter of his life came rushing back, and he realized that the truth he had spent years running from might finally be sitting right in front of him. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories that remind us humanity still exists. Nathan Carter had lived in the quiet suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, for nearly 6 years after life had completely unraveled. At 38 years old, he wasn't the man he had once imagined becoming. Instead of building the adventurous future he once dreamed about, he spent every waking hour trying to be enough for his 7-year-old son, Caleb. His wife had died from a sudden illness 3 years earlier, leaving Nathan with a mountain of grief and a little boy who asked every night whether his mother could still see them from heaven. Nathan never had easy answers. He simply hugged his son tighter and promised they would always have each other. Every morning began before sunrise. Nathan packed lunches, braided nothing because he only had a son, washed uniforms, rushed through traffic, worked long hours as a structural engineer, and hurried home hoping he wasn't too late for bedtime. Bills continued arriving faster than paychecks, the house constantly needed repairs, and loneliness had become another permanent resident living beside him. Yet every evening, when Caleb smiled after hearing one bedtime story, Nathan reminded himself that surviving another day was still a victory. Long before becoming a husband and father, Nathan had fallen deeply in love with a young woman named Rebecca Lawson while attending college in Charleston, South Carolina. They had been inseparable, dreaming about traveling across America together before settling down. On their graduation trip to a small coastal town in Maine, they had walked into a tiny tattoo studio owned by an elderly Navy veteran. Instead of choosing trendy designs, they created matching anchor tattoos wrapped with a thin olive branch. To them, the anchor symbolized staying grounded through life's storms, while the olive branch represented peace after every battle. The artist had smiled and promised that he would never recreate the design for anyone else. Life, however, had other plans. Rebecca disappeared from Nathan's life after accepting an overseas humanitarian assignment that unexpectedly became permanent following a devastating political crisis. Communication slowly faded until it stopped altogether. Nathan searched, wrote letters, and waited for years before finally believing she had chosen another life. Broken-hearted, he eventually moved forward, met another wonderful woman, built a family, and buried the old memories beneath new responsibilities. The airport cafe where everything changed was supposed to be nothing more than a brief stop during a business trip to Denver, Colorado. Caleb was spending the weekend with Nathan's sister, giving the exhausted father his first quiet moment in months. He had barely touched his sandwich when the four little girls approached. They looked about 8 years old, each with different hairstyles but unmistakably identical faces filled with curiosity rather than fear. Nathan smiled politely despite his exhaustion, assuming they had mistaken him for someone else. Then the oldest girl pointed toward his tattoo and innocently explained that their mother had the exact same anchor with the same little branch. She even traced the tiny curve near the bottom that only the original artist had added. Nathan's heart pounded so loudly he barely heard the rest of her sentence. The girls explained that their mother was waiting near the boarding gate because she wasn't feeling well after helping another passenger. They had wandered into the cafe searching for bottled water when they noticed Nathan's arm. Their mother often told them the tattoo reminded her that hope never disappeared, even when people did. Nathan's legs felt weak as he quietly followed the children toward Gate B17. Every step carried memories he thought time had erased forever. His breathing grew heavier until he finally saw a woman sitting alone near the window. Time had changed Rebecca Lawson. Soft lines surrounded her eyes. Her hair carried faint streaks of silver despite being only 37. She looked older than her years, not because of age, but because life had clearly demanded everything she had to give. Yet when she lifted her head, Nathan immediately recognized the same gentle eyes that had once made him believe the future held endless possibilities. Rebecca looked at Nathan for several silent seconds before tears instantly filled her eyes. Neither of them moved. The busy airport continued around them while two people stood frozen between the past they had lost and the present they never expected to find. The explanation that followed was almost impossible to believe. Rebecca revealed that years earlier, while working overseas after a humanitarian disaster, she had been caught in a violent evacuation that separated aid workers from communication for months. During the chaos, records were lost, messages never arrived, and several workers were mistakenly reported missing. By the time she finally returned to the United States, Nathan had already moved to another state. Every attempt to find him failed. Life continued pushing her forward whether she wanted it or not. She later married a widowed firefighter named Michael Harper, a kind man who accepted that part of Rebecca's heart still carried unanswered questions. Together, they adopted 4 orphaned sisters whose parents had died during a devastating tornado outbreak in Oklahoma. Keeping the sisters together became their shared mission because they refused to let tragedy separate another family. Then another heartbreaking loss arrived. Michael was killed while rescuing children from an apartment fire 2 years earlier. Rebecca suddenly found herself raising 4 daughters alone. Nathan quietly listened, realizing that both of them had spent years believing the other had willingly disappeared. Neither had abandoned the other. They had simply become victims of circumstances no one could have predicted. Rebecca gently admitted that she never removed the tattoo because it reminded her that some people shape our hearts forever, even if life leads us down different roads. Nathan confessed he had almost covered his own tattoo several times after his wife's death, but never found the strength. Somehow it had become less about lost love and more about surviving life's hardest storms. The conversation lasted for hours. They didn't speak as former lovers trying to reclaim the past. Instead, they spoke as 2 weary parents who understood sacrifice, grief, sleepless nights, and the quiet courage required to keep moving after unimaginable loss. The 4 little girls quickly became fascinated with Caleb after meeting him a few weeks later at a neighborhood picnic halfway between their cities. Caleb had never experienced having sisters, while the girls had never known a brother. Laughter slowly replaced awkwardness. Birthday parties became shared celebrations. Weekend visits became traditions. Nathan and Rebecca never rushed into romance. Both understood that love built from healing required patience instead of passion. Over the next 18 months, they supported one another through ordinary moments that mattered far more than dramatic declarations. Nathan repaired broken shelves in Rebecca's home without being asked. Rebecca helped Caleb prepare school science projects while encouraging the girls to cheer for him at every competition. Holidays slowly transformed from lonely occasions into joyful gatherings, filled with homemade meals, noisy children, and grateful hearts. The matching tattoos became family legends. The children often asked why 2 adults who had once lost each other still smiled whenever they looked at those tiny anchors. Nathan always answered the same way. Some promises aren't about staying together forever. Some promises are about becoming the kind of people who never stop choosing kindness, even after life breaks your heart. Eventually, Nathan and Rebecca realized they had unknowingly built something stronger than the relationship they once imagined in college. This time, their love wasn't based on youthful dreams. It was built on forgiveness, resilience, shared responsibility, and 5 children who had taught them that families are often created through compassion rather than perfect timing. One sunny autumn afternoon, surrounded by colorful maple trees in a public park outside Columbus, Nathan quietly asked Rebecca if she believed broken stories could still have beautiful endings. She smiled before showing him the faded anchor tattoo that had survived 15 years of storms. She already knew the answer. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope sometimes returns when we least expect it. Before we end, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and tell us, do you believe some people are meant to find each other again, even after life pulls them apart for years? Nathan never expected that one simple question from a little girl inside an airport cafe would completely rewrite the rest of his life. He thought he had lost his future many years earlier, only to discover that God sometimes writes the most beautiful chapters after we believe the story is over. The four little girls who innocently recognized an old tattoo didn't just reconnect two people. They reminded everyone around them that love is not measured by perfect timing, but by faithful hearts willing to keep choosing compassion through every season of life. And perhaps that is the greatest miracle of all, not that the past returned, but that healing found two broken families exactly when they needed each other most.